Everyone feeling all right? He's a Bolton fan right there, spot on. And you'll see that I'm wearing my favourite team. It's a football festival, so I thought I'd wear my favourite team, City. However, I did live in Bolton for a bit, so I do like Bolton Wanderers as well. So we're at the Football Writing Festival tonight, so it's only right to mention that you've written a book, haven't you?
Yes, I did.
Tell me about it.
2012, since I came out of my accident, so there was an opportunity where I can put my thought into words, and then I decided to write a book.
What made you decide to write? Like, what kind of went through your head? What made you think, do you know what?
Well,
I should get all this on paper.
There's a side where people think they see me as Fabrice the footballer, but also there's a side of me where my upbringing, come to England, try to make a living, try to make a career, and it's also a way to just motivate people that, you can make most of the opportunity this country's given me, and I made the most of it. And I also want to inspire upcoming generation to seek opportunity, just go after your dream, really.
So we'll talk more about your childhood in just a little bit.
Yeah.
What are you up to nowadays?
But I work for the PFA, but I'm fortunate after I'm back coaching at Bolton. So on my way here, I came up from training, so got changed in the car and come here. So it's been great, being able to work for the football club that's given me so many opportunities. It's an opportunity that I couldn't say no to, So yes, been back in Bolton for 1.5 years now.
Perfect. It's like full circle almost, isn't
it?
So let's rewind then to where it all began. You were born in Zaire, which is now the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Yeah.
What was your childhood like growing up there?
What about my childhood? My father was a politician, so we surround ourselves in all the political stuff. So, but for me, I was just a young kid who went to a decent school, enjoyed playing football, and grew up in a nice neighborhood. But it was just more and more complicated as time goes on into regard into the new regime taking over the country, and hence why my father had to leave in Congo to come to England.
Now, you growing up, I was reading your book actually. Very good book, everyone. Getting into football, growing up where you grew up, there wasn't much in the way of football, physical footballs. And I think there's a story where somebody gets an Adidas Telstar football, but he didn't want to get it dirty. Tell us a bit about that.
We play football, but not the way you play football in England. So for, if somebody's uncle come from Europe to bring a leather ball, it's like, wow, this is a great opportunity. And that's where you start to fall in love with football. And for me, it was just like to see it and to see how brand new it was and the feel of it. It just made me feel like, I want to pursue, I wouldn't say pursue this as a career. I just enjoying going out there and playing football, because in my head, from an African background, your parents want you to be a doctor, a lawyer, politician, somewhere down the line. Footballer wasn't never really in my mind. It was more of a just go and play. And the more you play, the more you enjoyed it.
So were you involved in a team, or was it just like a group of mates?
No, I never was involved in a team. We're just a group of us where we go to different streets, we play our guys, our kids. That's how I got into it. But it wasn't anything about I was selected to play for this certain sector. No, it was just me and my mate would go on and play against different guys.
Perfect. Now, you did mention there about the kind of conflict in the new regime.
Yeah.
Now, fast forwarding a bit, you left to come to England, but you left your mum behind. What was that like coming over and not really speaking much English and being in a whole different country at, such a young age?
I mean, not to speak English is a big thing. That was huge, because in the Congo, because we were colonized by the Belgians, so French is the biggest language. So in terms of speaking English, it's like English kid here learning how to speak French. So there's not really much of grasping there. So with me, it was just, as far as English I know was, hello, how are you? That's as far as I can go. Anything else is, I didn't know what's happening. So to come to the new country, to learn a new language, my first day at school, my word, that was more of a hell of experience, because you're going in there and you see all these kids speaking so quickly. You're like, well, in the Congo they say this, but this kid's speaking about this, which is quite fluent, But it was just trying to learn, and in the way I used to learn English most of the time is I used to have a dictionary with me in the classroom. So every class I'll go in, there's a fresh dictionary where a teacher will say something. I gotta quickly look into the dictionary to try to understand what she was teaching about, and then try to understand it. And one of the ways I make friends because of football. And I play football at lunchtime, break time, and everybody knew Fabrice, the tall African kid. So that's why I made friends. That's why I learned how to play football. The more I play, the more, you start to learn all the horrible language and all that comes stuff with football. But in terms of again, to become a footballer, that wasn't a part of the plan. As I said, my dad was, you go to school, study, and then be somebody. But football just kept coming along my way.
So, then again, fast forwarding a bit more, you start playing for Arsenal in their youth setup.
Yeah.
How did your dad take that? Because I know, like you were just saying, maybe he wasn't too keen with the football, but once he saw you going to a big club, was he a bit happier about it? Or?
Now, with the Arsenal situation, it was more of a deal. More like he said to me, if you're going to do this, do it properly. But at the same time, number one priority is your schoolwork. So if I get a phone call from school about you misbehaving, we're not even calling about negotiation. It's just I'm going to pull the plug off and that's you done. And African parenting, when they say that's you done, they mean that's you done. There's no words about it, And he was just like that to me. It's like, if you're going to do it properly. Go to school, study. If you're going to play football, play properly. And that's how I took in football. Because it was only I was allowed to study, and also my grade was good, hence why I was able to play. But if it wasn't good, I don't think I'd be able to play.
And how did it come about getting into the Arsenal youth setup?
Well, the Arsenal setup, it was a funny one because we had a new classmate who came into year 9. He's from Sierra Leone, and they speak English. They speak French. So I was fluent in French. And at lunchtime, he saw me play, but we did a lot of things together, because we're two African boys, we help each other out. And 1 minute, out of the blue, he said, I play for Arsenal. I was like, yeah, good one. Because he's my mate, I see him every day. He's like, hey, I said, I play for Arsenal. I said, yeah, good one. And I said, no, seriously. I said, okay, prove to me then. It's like, okay. So after school, went to his house, he showed me all this stuff, the tracksuit, blah, blah, blah. So you're like, I'm not saying I'm going to believe you, but I'm like, okay, looks a bit okay. And next day, he came back to me. He said, listen, I will help you to introduce you to my coach, and if they like you, they like you. But you have to be serious about it, I was like, okay, but all I thought he was just pulling me along. Yeah. Now, the following week, he said, I spoke to my coach, and they asked you to come and watch us, or come and train with us. The bear in mind, also have never seen me play. They don't know which position I am. They don't know how tall I am, or if I'm even capable enough to play in the academy. So I made my way there. Was fortunate enough that where Arsenal train to my parents' house is about 10 minutes. So I got there extra early. I went to see the coach. So I said, hey, my name is Fabrice. I'm Rashid's friend. He asked me to speak to you guys. They're like, who? I said, no. I said to them, Rashid said, if I come here, I'll be able to play. So in my head, I'm thinking, my friend went in there. He's already planned it out for me. I can say hello. They're like, oh, yeah, but we don't know you. I said, no, I'm Rashid's friend. He's like, yeah, but we don't know you like that, So I waited in the cold, and then 10 minutes later, Rashid came. I said, Rash, I thought you told them about me. I said, what did they say? I said, well, they said they don't know me. That's why I'm here. He's like, oh, no. But because Rashid was so loved at Arsenal were willing to do whatever he wanted to keep him at the club because he's one of the best young players. They're like, you know what? Because he's your friend, we want to make you happy. He can come train with us. But for a couple of weeks, and we can let him go. That was it. We can let him go. I think the first training session, I was out of breath for a bit. Second training session, you're like, okay, this is what it's like to play the academy kid. Third training session, I got even extra early. I asked for the ball. I started practicing stuff outside the pitch, blah, blah, blah. By the time 6 weeks later, they're like, okay, we'll give you 6 weeks trial. And at the end of the 6 weeks, they're like, okay, we can sign you. That's how I got into football.
Perfect. Now, were you an Arsenal fan before you moved over? Or are you an Arsenal fan now?
I mean, now I'm a football fan. I don't fan anybody. I just love to watch football. Back then, of course, most African countries, they love Arsenal.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
So you played for the England youth setup as well.
Yeah.
You know, when you started playing for the under-21s, you did get a call from DRC to play for them, but you chose not to. You chose to play for England. Why is that?
I mean, for the safety of my father, because I just feel like it was so close to what's happened before, and to go back again and to get involved in that situation, because they only takes somebody to recognize me and my surname, and they'll be like, okay, that's his son here, let's go after him. So that was the precaution not to take at that particular time.
Brilliant. Now, do you what are your favourite memories from your kind of youth career with Arsenal and England?
My favourite memory, I mean, making my debut for Arsenal at 18 years of age. I mean, it's a dream come true because at 1 minute you're like, oh yeah, one day I'll play football. But to be able to, to hear from Arsene Wenger on a Sunday evening, on a Sunday morning, he said, get ready, you're going to play on a Wednesday. And to go training on a Monday and to be actually being in an environment where it's actually getting serious is probably the best feeling. I mean, you can't bite that.
Perfect. Now, fast forward a bit. Shortly after, you moved to the club that you're arguably most famous for, just up the road, Bolton Wanderers. Have you got any Bolton fans aside from this chap? Have you got any Bolton fans in here? There's a few. How did that transfer to Bolton come about? Because you went to Birmingham on loan first.
Yeah, well, the Bolton thing happened. We had a 3-game left at Birmingham City, and it was more of a make-or-breaker, and we got relegated. But I know there was a conversation happening because Sam left Bolton. Gary Mason came in, and Gary wanted to change the look of the team. He wanted to bring more younger players, so he brought Gary Cahill in that January transfer window where Gary played really well. So he wanted to bring more younger player, and he spoke to my agent. But I knew this from April. So I'm going to football knowing that come August I'm not gonna be here regardless. But in my head I'm thinking I'm just gonna try. It's very difficult because in your head you're thinking, okay, I'm gonna try my best to play football, but knowing fully well that regardless what happened, I'll move on. We got relegated at Birmingham, and the transfer fee came up. Birmingham accepted the fee, and I moved to Bolton. It was I stayed in the Reebok Stadium for a month. It rains. Oh my god! Oh my god!
I know.
I mean, like you're like, okay. I thought Birmingham was bad, but wow, it rained. Like the first 3 days. Just rain. But you get to love it, you just go to buy with the spirit of Bolton. I walked to a change room with so many men in there and how to quickly learn about how to play football in a different way. And then I'm very thankful and grateful for that.
Now, 17th of March 2012, a date that will, I'm sure, live in your head and many other fans' heads forever. FA Cup quarter-final against Spurs at White Hart Lane. Well, I'll let you tell the story. What happened that day?
I mean, it's been written and spoken in many ways. We were playing FA Cup. We travel. We usually travel the day before, and I came home went training on a Friday morning. I left my stuff at home in terms of my packing stuff. We usually meet up at Stockport station to get a train from Stockport to London. So after training, I went home, I got my stuff. My fiancée and my wife now dropped me back to the station to meet up with the boys. So we met up. Again, from Manchester to London, I was fine. There was no problem with me whatsoever. I felt okay. Spoke to my dad when I got to London, arranged his tickets and everything else. Again, there was no problem whatsoever. So we go to the, I knew I was starting, but the manager didn't say the team to the Saturday. So the Saturday morning, as the usual routine, you go out, have a breakfast. Around about 11 o'clock, you go for team walk. You walk, blah, blah, blah. Then you come back in. He announced the team. Again, no problem whatsoever. We traveled down to the stadium, felt great, said I'm looking forward to this one here. Went into the stadium, have a look around, no issue. When I mean no issue, like I'm a normal, nothing. As the game started now, and I made a couple of runs, I missed a chance. I think I missed a chance, get in a box, and then I'm running back not far from the halfway line. There was nobody around me, and I just hit the floor down. That was the last time I was able to play football. That was probably what I remember. And from there, all the pictures I've seen from me being turned around, carried off the pitch, I wasn't aware of that at all.
So, I mean, you died for 78 minutes, is, the crux of it. How did you feel when, time had passed and you'd come to and kind of everything was okay again or getting better again? How did it make you feel to know that all these people and the cardiologist who came down from the stands, they fought so hard to basically ensure that you sat here now?
When I woke up and they told me what happened to me, I was in disbelief. I'm like, yeah, good one, whatever. But like, no, this is what happened to you. I say, no, it can't happen to me. But the longer I stay in the hospital, there's so many people come to see me that I've not seen in a long time. So you start to realize this thing is bigger than what I thought, and you get people that coaches you, that used to look after you, and they're coming in. And I understand they were protecting my feeling because most of them coming in, they didn't want to say what's wrong with me. They're like, oh, I'm happy, just you're okay. That's the most important thing. As time goes on, it was, I think, the second week. I had, woke up in the morning. It was just me and the doctor. And I said to him, Doc, what's going on here? Like, when I'm going home? He's like, well, Fab, you had a big accident, I said, what accident? He said that you had a heart attack, this is what happened, you were dead, blah, blah, blah. You're like, wow. And then slowly and surely, you start to, I said that I'm fortunate enough that it happened in the football pitch. If this happened in anywhere else, we wouldn't have this conversation. And just listening to people and coming in, and the funny thing is, not even the funny thing is that when I was playing, my older son was watching the game at home. So he knew what happened. And when the accident happened, my wife, she had to travel from Manchester to London without knowing the outcome. So they was more impact on them than me because I was sleeping most of the time anyway. So it was almost like in shock that it really happened to me. But as I said, I was fortunate if I had the best medical staff I can ask and wish for. The football world and the people around the world, the Bolton fan, they were so great towards me, so great. And to be able to help me to make that transition because it can be very, very tough.
I mean, something that I actually read was that your dad, who was in the stadium at the time, had left to go to the toilet just before it happened.
My dad was at the stadium. My brother was at the stadium. I had a cardiologist who uses his nephew's ticket to come to watch the game. And he cycled to the game. He left his bike in the stadium. I had an ambulance which was 10 seconds away from me. I had two doctors from two teams, which makes it 4. So you couldn't ask for a better place for this to happen than that particular moment. And they all just came together, did an absolutely amazing job to get me from the pitch to the ambulance, from the ambulance to the hospital.
Obviously then, you had the decision to make.
Yeah.
Do you carry on playing football or not? How did you come to the decision to essentially retire? Or was the decision made for you?
No, I mean, the decision to retire, I had to see 3 specialists. And if they can find a way to get my heart in a normal level in terms of heartbeat, I'll be able to play. But obviously, I mean 3 specialists, and those are the best of the best. The one in central London, the one in Belgium, and the American. The one in central London said to me, it's not worth to try. The one in Belgium said to me, you going back is like you're going into your own grave. I think that was like, okay, I can't discuss with that one. And the one in America, I was like, it wouldn't even entertain the conversation. And, obviously I was upset. But I had to look at the bigger picture, so I'm here, got my family, my kids, to be able to do stuff like this and speak to my friends and family. And it was just a difficult pill to swallow at that particular moment, because I feel like this dream was being taken away from me without me having a say on it. But then, in reality, it could have been a lot worse. So you either just take what it is and then you move on with it, and which I'm happy with it.
I mean, after that, you didn't stay off the pitch for too long, Bolton organising a testimonial for you. Just how did that make you feel to be back in Bolton with the fans and walking out onto that pitch?
Even the idea of playing the game for me, I wasn't quite sure, but I was like, well, I've done my time, is just move on. But as time goes by, you sit back and you realize how much the people from Bolton went out of the way to send all the well wishes, the card, flowers, the football jersey, all that kind of stuff. I felt it was just the right thing to do, is to go back and do the game for them. So for me, I'm forever grateful for Bolton. I said, it's been my. Yes, I came for the Arsenal Academy, but to be honest with
you. Now, happy give us some of your fond memories from your time at Bolton Wanderers.
I think Bolton fans will agree here, beside the 4-0 loss to Stoke, and I think that's a difficult one to swallow. My first game for Bolton, it was great. The goal against Wigan, great, enjoyed it. The goal against Blackburn, great, I enjoyed that.
So all your goals, basically.
Winning away from home, especially the place that you never thought you get a result. That was always a good one. And I think Bolton fan I hope one day we'll get back to what it used to be, because they deserve to see their team play in the Premier League.
Now, we've got something in common. Yeah. We're both qualified journalists, aren't we? So I actually saw you years ago. You won't remember, it was a long time ago, maybe 2013, times. It was at a mixed zone presser at Man City. Yeah. And everyone was like, oh, Fabrice is over there. He's doing journalism. He had a BBC pass on. I was like, oh. So I saw you then. Tell us a bit about how difficult or easy is it to transition from being a footballer to
the transition it depends how you want to make it, because this is where I have a whole new respect for journalists, okay? After that Man City game, I want to do the Chelsea game. And, I know most of the Chelsea boys, and this was a Champions League. I was doing the game. I had to write the game at the same time, and I need to do the after the game where you do the post-match interview. I kid you not, right? I left that place thinking, I think that moment where I realized I don't like football the way, I waited, and those are the guys that I played with, not like they don't know me, I know these guys, And I think Chelsea lost. It was against Atletico Madrid. They lost the game. Everybody just walked past me. I said, Cesc, Fab, I need to go. I'm like, all I want is 2 words. I'm not asking for anything. I was fortunate enough that Gary Cahill, he came in and spoke to me, which bailed me out because I was in a lot of pressure from the editor. But you're there in the cold, I'm thinking, how these people do it, where you sit outside and all I'm asking for, you just give me 2 words, that's it. And I got a whole new respect for everybody that's out there in terms of journalism. It's a tough one. But I appreciate it because you see the other side of it. You did the written journalism, I did the radio, and I did the TV. Out of all 3, I actually prefer the written journalism more than the TV, anything else, because you're out there with them. You can sense them, you can see the body language, you can create a picture about them as well.
Brilliant. Now, what other plans do you have going forward?
Well, I'm back coaching at Bolton, so I came from training ground today, so I enjoy it. It's a great learning curve for me. We got Man United tomorrow, so we have to see how it goes on tomorrow. But no, it's been great. I enjoy it because when you train the kids, you want to help them, and you see so much of yourself in them to the point where you're like, come on, I need to, try as much as I can in terms of myself to hopefully to make them some type of footballer. So it's been a great journey so far, and I love it every second of it. But we'll see what happens.
Brilliant. Well, I think if we've got time, if it open up to the floor, if anyone's got any questions.
So, hello, I'm Wei. Bolton has got, sorry to be a bit critical, but Bolton has got, last Saturday, we've got eliminated for the FA Cup for the 5th consecutive season in the first round of the competition, as much as I don't want to remind of that. And there's a lot of speculation going about Ian Nevitt's job. Is he the right man for the job? Because he's kind of stalled a little bit all the players, and some of the players are like, oh, why is he out of position? And the fan view is very mixed. What are your opinions on that? And how long do you think for Bolton to develop? Do you think he's the right man to bring it forward?
I mean, in regard to Ian, is he the right person? I mean, he's helped the club, he's stabilized the club really well. Yes, the result in the last couple of weeks has not been great, especially the Barnsley one. There's a couple of games where Cheltenham away, I think, it's Cheltenham, where they got a draw or loss, I think. But the club went through a lot of tough time the past 4 years. You know, for us to even be where we are in the league compared to other teams, it's a great achievement. So it's all about giving him time, but also the recruitment. You know, we're not working in the same budget as Derby or the other club there. You know, so or Sheffield Wednesday. You got to remember that they're also there at the same time. So Ian has a very tough job in his hand, but he's doing I think the best he can to that team, to that squad, to be able to get the club in the right direction. One thing I can guarantee you, everybody who goes watch Bolton, you always have a good fan base. They're always good 10 to 15,000 people turn up watch Bolton, so which shows that the club is moving in the right direction. Maybe we need somebody with a bigger checkbook and you just put it in the club, and you know, because everybody's doing it, why not us? So, you know, and a huge investment in the football club, huge investment in the facility, would attract players. But Ian is a tough job, but he's doing his best as he can. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Any others?
There's a few.
Hi, I'm Hattie. I just wanted to ask about, I think that, I always think it must be a really hard transition going from playing football to what you do afterwards. You've talked a little bit about doing journalism and then now about coaching, but obviously your experience of that transition was much more sharp than it is for a lot of players. So I just wondered how you found that transition. Was it difficult? Did you have to think quite a lot about the different options that there were out there for you?
Well, I was fortunate enough that because of what happened to me, there's a lot of support that came on my way in terms of my transition. You know, and being an ex-professional footballer, the PFA, which is the Professional Footballer Association, there was the first people to say, you know what, if this is going to call it a day, you can come work for us full-time. And this wasn't even like, this is Gordon Taylor coming in and say, listen, it's a job for you here, whenever you want, you can come in. And that was massive for me. Because one thing you realize when you stop playing football, the biggest thing is the routine. Because I'm used to getting up early in the morning, have a shower, get ready and go to football. Now, get up in the morning, okay, nothing else to do. So being able to have a routine was probably the biggest transition I had to, which is, I'm very thankful because Gordon came in, even when I had a lot of issues regarding to my contract, he just stepped in and smoothed everything off for me. So having the great union, it helps a lot. And I think for football, for guys who play in the football, the PFA is such a big thing. They do a good job.
Anyone? Well, the front was a few.
Hi, I'm Alex on behalf of Sporf. With your situation, you said that doctors told you if you carried on playing, it's like running into your own grave. What do you think about players like Ericsson and what they were probably told? And do you think they're playing with a risk, or? I
mean, everybody's case is different. You have to be aware of that. You know, you got to remember, it took me 7 to 8 minutes to be able to breathe again. Christian, by the time he was leaving the field, he was already awake. And the way my accident happened, it's almost like he's walk everybody around in terms of cardiac arrest. So there's a huge improvement in that area. in terms of looking after players. And as I said, that was done for 78. Christian was done for about a minute or so. I woke up 3 days after. He woke up 10 minutes after. So it was just massive difference. And I mean, listen, you don't sign for Man United unless every box is ticked. And I think with that, Christian, I'm happy to see him playing football because it shows that the medical staff have done their due diligence to make sure that he's able to play. So everybody's case is different. And in my case, I'm completely different to Christian. I'm just happy that he's able to play again.
Good evening. Obviously, Fabrice, you're from the DRC. The DRC has produced so many skillful players in the past. I just wondered why isn't there a greater global profile of the Congolese national team in terms of bringing talents forward?
The situation with the DRC is boiled down to an organization, which is a big thing. For those who don't know DRC, but I can name probably one player here you would never thought he should be playing for DRC. You don't know?
Ooh.
Your captain.
Really?
Yeah, I know. Company.
I did not know that. I'm learning tonight as well.
I mean, we have even Company, Lukaku, Benteke, myself, Makelele. There's a various of us where, because of our parents seek asylum in Belgium, France, England, and the kids just grew up, and then the nationality made the most of it. But this does not mean there's a little group of guys now who want to play for the national team, which is good to see. But it just happened that back then the organization wasn't what it is now. Hence why most of the guys play for their adopted country.
Thank you, Fabrice. It was a really good talk. I just wondered, I don't know if you're aware, Coronation Street featured your story.
Did it?
Yeah.
No, seriously, I wasn't aware. Seriously. Seriously?
Yeah, seriously, yeah.
Oh.
So I just wondered how you felt about, obviously it wasn't a nice event to happen to you, but perhaps it could help people, other footballers or other sports people.
I mean, the way you look at my accident, it's just, there's so many areas where you can see, one thing is you need to learn how to do CPR because that's the biggest thing that did in terms of my recovery. You got to be able to do, you need to be able to do the CPR and then use the machine, the defibrillator as another thing. And also being able to call the ambulance, that's 2 things, 3 things now. And as I said, and hence why in the Premier League now, if you notice, there's an ambulance which is literally a meter away from the pitch every single game, because of what happened to me. And I think we can go a little better, but also I feel like it just doesn't have to be in football. We can teach all the kids because if you start from a young age, you've got the primary school teacher, you've got a primary school, secondary school, because they're all active out there. And if you can teach one of them how to do CPR, you have a likelihood chances that to save somebody from sudden cardiac arrest. So there's a lot of positive from my accident where I feel like, yes, the dream has been taken away from me, but there's a lot to take out of it where a lot of people can benefit from it.
Okay, we've got time for 2 more questions, I think.
Hi, Fabrice. It's a bit of a morbid thing, but with your accident and kind of like the eyes of the world kind of watching that thing, have you actually ever kind of watched that back? And I know you said you kind of passed out. Was that like a surreal experience if you did, sort of thing?
I watched my accident one time, I say. You have your moment where you just want to put it at the back of your head that you're not interested to watch it. Then you're like, okay, I'm gonna give this one go, and that's it. So, and the one was the one, and that's me. Because it's almost like, yeah, I've done it now. And yes, it was difficult to watch it and almost surreal because you're like, to see myself falling down with nobody around me and then all of that stuff. So, yeah, I'm glad I got to watch it and it's gone now.
Time for one more question?
Yeah, just one more question if there was one. Or if not, we can wrap it up.
There's one up here.
Hi, Fabrice. So I actually lived in Bolton for 15 years. I consider myself, Bolton my second team, but my first team is Watford.
Yeah.
And obviously an obvious link there is Marvin Sordell,
Yeah.
he quit football, I believe, because of mental health issues.
Yeah.
And obviously you quit because of obviously physical health issues. But I want to know, from a mental health aspect, do you feel enough is being done in the game for players?
There's a lot of people now who feel brave enough to come out and speak about it, because we felt like to be able to show that side of it, it was almost seemed like you're just a weak person. Whereas we know that football is so intense and mentally is very, very tough for you. So to be able to take a time away from the game and see somebody, and just express yourself away from people, because, you've been in a change room. When you go in the change room, not everybody is happy-chappy, but everybody has their own demon they're fighting. So you've got to be very understanding of what people are going through, but also make football a safe space. And I think more and more it's becoming more a safer space. It could do a lot better, but it's getting there. And I think mental health is a big thing, especially this current generation, because everything is moving 100 miles per hour. And there's a pressure from every corner to be somebody. Nobody wants to be second, everybody wants to be first, all that kind of stuff. And it filters down all the way from, the first team to the academy and to the kids that are coaches. So you have to sometimes be aware how you speak to them. Just get to know them, and that way you get to see what they're going through. At the same time, be aware that it's a very sensitive subject, So mental health is a big thing. And I always say to the players or to anybody, if you're struggling for something or if you're going through something, ask for help. Don't suffer in silence.
No. All right, I think that's all I've got time for this panel. Thank you, everyone. Thanks to Fabrice Muamba.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, guys, if you want to hear more or read more about Fabrice's story, I'm sure I'll tell you what his book's called.
Oh, I'm still standing.
There we go. So have a look at that. I've read it. It's brilliant. So yeah, thanks. Stay tuned because we've got another session coming up just afterwards. But yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks again to Fabrice.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fabrice.
Thank you.
What would you like?
Hi. Go and sit down there.
Okay. Yes, sir.
We had to drag him away from him and Fab Muamba backstage, trying to work out a best 11 from the Premier League so far this season, and trying to let Fab down in that he wasn't going to include 11 Arsenal players.
This is true, yeah.
So sorry about that.
Life goes on.
We have important work to do here. Well, first of all, how much did you enjoy the fact that I made you talk about your life for more than 300 pages worth of book, and now that it's there and in the shops, and please buy it, everybody, and if you haven't bought it, what on earth are you doing here? Now that it's available forever and ever and ever and ever and ever, and is that really intimidating?
So you say the 300 pages thing, but how many sort of sessions did we have together, like speaking about things, and how many hours would you say we put into it? Just speaking to me alone.
It was about 30 hours, I think. So this is going to seem like a breeze.
Yeah, exactly. It was strange because I'm quite a private person. So to see Hugh sort of just be prodding and probing and asking me certain things, taking me to points in my life and career which I'd never really had to speak about before. It was strange, but I think in some ways it was also really good because it made me think about, say, the two different perspectives. Like throughout the book, there are times where I speak about something which I did and explain why I did it at that time, but how I see it today. And I think that sort of side by side was quite interesting, but there were lots of good times, lots of bad times, and it sort of makes you just look back in a more appreciative manner because I think for most of us, we are where we are today, and we think we know why. But when you really get asked about it, you start to realize it's more than just the big moments within your life. There's so many smaller things along the way which kind of set the tone for who you are. So yeah, it was 30 long hours with you in my house. You had a lot of my biscuits. I had quite a few teas. Was it one sugar?
One sugar, thank you. And no, I didn't have any of your biscuits. There weren't any left.
Yes, because I had all the biscuits.
Yeah, thank you.
It was good. It was good. Initially, I didn't want to be involved in any sort of book whatsoever because, like I said, I've been very, very private for a very long time. But he talked me around, and we did it, and now I see the bigger picture, and I'm incredibly proud to say that I have been published, and my story's out there. And now when people come up to me and say, oh, I read your book, it's like, oh, What did you think? Because, you know...
They wouldn't bring it up if they didn't like it.
It's like, this is my life. Tell me you love it. Tell me it's the best thing you've ever seen. And thankfully it's been good, but I think it's been very, very well written by Hugh, and I appreciate that, because within the footballing world, there aren't that many people that you can say you trust 100%, but he's definitely that person.
Well, that's the funny thing, because we'll go back a step here, because you mentioned that somebody had kind of floated the idea with you before, because I phoned you about it, and you basically said, no, and it was like shutting me down, but then I kind of managed to weasel my way into it. But I think there's a reason for that. First of all, you're private, that you've mentioned, but the other reason is, and this is a football writing festival, so we should be careful who we insult, but a lot of footballer autobiographies are kind of day one to day the end, and they are linear, they are just one story, they are a narrative, and they are not necessarily particularly well written, because they are really famous.
Yes.
So it doesn't really matter how well it's written, because people are desperate to find out what that person, that really famous person, thought at that time. I'm going to confess, I'm a Southampton fan. This person has been rather tarnished in public society since, but Matt Letizia is my favourite player growing up, and he wrote an autobiography, and I'll be honest with you, it's terrible. And I don't think his ghostwriter is here. But the fact is that I read this book and I thought, I'm really, really interested in finding out what my favourite player ever thought about this, and this, and this. And it was just basically just one long line, and he just complained about a lot.
Yeah.
And I think that there are a lot of football autobiographies that are tarnished with that brush. So I can understand your initial reticence, because you're thinking, well, I didn't really want to do that. And the purpose of us eventually deciding to do it, and me convincing you to do one, is because we thought, I convinced you, that you are a multifaceted person with different kinds of stories to tell.
And you paid for lunch.
And I did pay for lunch on the business and expense. So that was the purpose. And the book that has resulted, I think, tries to reflect that. Because you are a person with many stories to tell, and they aren't just about football.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think the way that football goes, if you've not achieved the highest thing in winning a World Cup, winning a league, winning a whatever, you kind of believe that your story's not worth telling. But with Hugh, he's very good at sort of talking me around and sort of making me realize the significance of the places that I've been in my own space within the football world as well. And I think some of those books where you have somebody who has won it all, you know, they get targeted by lots of people because it's the easiest book in the world to write. You don't ever really know about the person unless somebody's come through adversity. It's like, yeah, I was playing in the Champions League final and I felt incredible and I knew we were going to win. Like, that's a 1% of story, probably less than. My story is more about the realities of what football is for the majority of us, but then even within that, I always felt like I was a bit different to that, and through the story, I think that comes across. And I remember those moments, the highs, the lows, the way I'd be thinking about things, and even from a, say, Mancunian perspective, to be the first signing that when City became an academy, to be ball boying at Main Road, to actually be, you know, City fans remember the last game being against Southampton, interestingly, at Main Road. Well, I played for the under-17s the week after, so I was a part of that. I was there before the takeover, I was there after the takeover. I saw the changes. I went to QPR, which at the time was somewhat of a circus. Then to be in America in 2020 as a foreigner, so many stories within that. And you realize, like, in time, so I spent the last 2 years of my career playing football, but also doing little bits of media. And one thing which they tell you is that as you speak on things that you see, try and reference it into things that you've seen and talk about your own experiences, because that will really get the audience engaged. So from doing bits of radio for the BBC and the like, I started to realize I was telling my story more and more, and people were really interested. There's so many little things which you take for granted within football, which you assume nobody cares about. But people don't care about it because they don't know about it. I think an example was, say, at Queen's Park Rangers, there was a barrier to get into the training ground. In fact, I'll tell you 2 QPR stories. I apologise for this. I know we're up north, but I'll tell you 2 stories. There was a barrier, and there was a guy that was always on it. He was noting down what time people were getting in. And he always used to say it's for, you know, like fire safety and all this. But then that sheet of paper would always find its way to the manager. So most people are completely fine with it. But there are always 1 or 2 people who are always just on the edge. And there were times where I'd make in at like 9:59 to get in for 10, sit in the dressing room. And then 10 minutes later, someone comes in. I said, oh, were you late? He said, no, I wasn't late now. No, I've been here for 10 minutes. I said, but I got in at 9:59. No. Go check the sheet. So they're paying off the guy at the barrier. You know, so QPR fans are like, oh, who was it? Who was it? Who was it? It's like, oh yeah, I suppose that is pretty interesting. And then the other side of it. So when I was at QPR, we were in the Premier League, and this was the same training ground that Chelsea played at when they first won the Premier League in 2005. Yeah. So we couldn't train there on a Wednesday, and the reason we couldn't is because the training ground was owned by Imperial College London, and that was their sports day. So even if we had a big game to get ready for, unfortunately the students came first. You know, these little stories and little feelings that you just take for granted, because when you look around you within football, everyone's in the same situation, so you don't spend time talking about it. But then the more you sort of start to offer it to the outside world, it's actually quite interesting. And you basically convinced me I had an interesting life, an interesting career, and then sat me down and made me talk about it for 30 hours. So I like to think there's some stuff in there which people don't know, and it's not all about just being at the highs of the highs, because those points aren't the same for everybody. Like even, say, the way media is today with certain channels, you feel more comfortable seeing a face that you've seen before be successful, but their opinion and viewpoint on things doesn't represent the majority of what's actually going on. Because another example was when I was at QPR, up until that I was 25 years of age, and we stayed up on the last day of the season. I think some of you might have seen the game 10 years ago. And I remember celebrating after that game was finished. And the reason I was celebrating is because we secured our place in the Premier League for the next season. It wasn't about finishing 17th, it was about securing a place in the league. But based on how I watched TV before that, for the years prior, I was of the mindset that people should never celebrate finishing 17th. But the people that were telling me that were the ones who had a bad month if they didn't win 4 games out of 4. Like, that's not the reality of football. That's not the reality of how most people perceive it. But all of a sudden, when you're in it and you understand it, you can try and explain that so that the view that people have of the game is a more realistic one instead of this like fantastical one that sometimes people believe.
Yeah, and books are often a listing of events, but what books do in addition to that is that they're supposed to give some sort of emotional context to the protagonist of the book. And it was actually quite an emotional process for the both of us, because I was there the first time as well. That last game at Main Road, I was there for that. I then watched Saints lose the FA Cup final to Arsenal the week after, but I was there for those games. I watched you in the games that we were discussing in that time that we spent together, and it was for me the same sort of process. I was trying to remember what had happened, and it was actually quite an interesting journey for me to go through. To go, oh yeah, no, you remember that happening, and oh yeah, that prompts a memory in me. And so it was 30 hours of me standing there telling you to tell me stuff. Yeah. But it ended up being, hopefully, an interesting conversation in that we were prompting each other to remember stuff, which then led to more questions, which led to you coming up with more memories too. So I think it's always helpful. Yes, you will always get emotional context in a football or autobiography, but hopefully if the person asking the questions has something to input as well, and they're not just standing there just ticking off a list of events, it makes it a little bit more of an easy process.
That's very true, and I think what you did well is...
Hang on a minute, that wasn't...
this maybe...
Let's talk about me for
maybe
a while.
This is the cynic in me again. Maybe this is the cynic in me again, but, you know, there are a lot of people within the world of football and celebrity and so on who are quite keen on themselves, say, yeah? So when somebody says, come and write a book, I'm immediately thinking, you think I'm the type of person that says, oh, I want people to write a book about me? Like, don't be ridiculous. But you sort of, you explained it.
Actually, that was one of your main concerns at the beginning. That you thought that it was
the perception upon having
self-congratulatory.
Yeah.
But I immediately told you there was nothing to congratulate yourself about.
Yeah, that's exactly true. It's perfectly fair. But there are lots of people who would say that a book should be written about them. And most of those people aren't very popular within the game of football. So let's say that. But again, you did a very good job. It pains me to say this because I've known him for a long time, but he did a very good job. And I think the way that you portrayed him within the book is exactly how I wanted it to be. And more than how I wanted it to be, is how I needed it to be. Because if it doesn't come out in the way that I perceived it, then I'd live with regret for the rest of my life. And one thing about football is that if you guys have probably all seen it, if you pay attention to football, like a press conference with a player or post-match interview is the most boring thing on the face of the planet. And the reason for that is because you don't want to cause any controversy. You don't want to be misrepresented. Like if somebody says, oh, that was a great result, and now you're playing the team next week who are bottom, who've not scored a goal in 10 years, the first thing you say, well, it's going to be a tough game because you know they're looking for that first goal. But you say that just because you know then that can't be used against you. So whenever you speak to somebody, you're always worried about, like, how will this come out? Will people perceive you to be different? Because the moment your image changes once, it's very, very hard to change back. But from Hugh, from when I was very young, he's been very good at that, and he's one of the few who I trust 100%.
He was thrown into the lion's den when the director of communications at Manchester City, a guy called Paul Tyrrell, started up a podcast. They didn't last, did they? And they wanted to do a podcast, and they wanted Andy Hinchcliffe and I to do it because we were the commentary team for local radio here in Manchester at that time. And it was a vehicle for Paul Tyrrell, as is his wont as the director of communications, to try and get something. He wanted it to be earthy and real, which meant that we had no production values at all, which was accurate. We worked for commercial radio. But one of the first things he said was, we want to give some of the younger players an opportunity to have their first interviews so that they kind of are introduced to how things work. And there's this young player, he's called Nedum, he's doing his A-levels at the same time as being a professional footballer. It's really interesting. And so even back then, and Nedum wasn't aware that he was being pitched like that, even if he was accurately both a professional footballer and doing his A-levels. But you were already, to somebody like Paul Tyrrell, an interesting person to then have that at the age of 17, as you were at the time, very soon to be 18, have that really, really very early on in your career, and yet to not be kind of saddled by it, not to be pigeonholed by it, I think is an important part of it. Because you went off and you had such a story to tell at Manchester City and QPR, and of course the much more personal stuff that's in the book as well. But having been pitched as a student who's intelligent and therefore not a normal footballer, how did you find that throughout your career, and then going through that again for the book? Because it's true, it's you, but you don't want to be just that, because it reduces you to just that guy with brains who can talk a bit.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. It's one of the few good questions you've offered to me.
Well, your answer can be another chapter, if you like.
Yeah, this is true. Once people believe you are something within football, and I guess to a certain extent life as well, you can never escape it. But this isn't the worst thing in the world. Oh, he's a really clever guy. The thing that bothered me the most was because I was quite good with, because one of my A-levels was ICT. It meant around the times of the iPod, I was the only person who could somehow put music onto iPods. So wherever I went, could you do this for me? Could you do this? I've got an issue with my laptop. For some reason, I was like the Apple Care help person or whatever.
You're the genius,
man. Yeah, I literally was the genius. Yeah, things like that were a bit strange. But then in some ways, I didn't mind it, because I've always been part of any group that I've been in. But then it can also be separate as well. Because for me, say for example, like I've never really drunk. So when you go on team dues and like I'm not drinking, people are they almost expect it. Oh yeah, of course, that's who you are. And I think they respect you as a person when you're very consistent with what you do. And I think that's exactly who I've been. And to be told that you're the intelligent one, like, it's not the worst thing in the world. I've heard people get called worse. I'm sure we've all possibly said worse. But yeah, it was interesting. And to be able to put it down into the book, sort of the way that I perceive things, because I think at times being somebody who thinks about things, being like a reasonable critical thinker, isn't necessarily always the best thing when it comes down to football, because it's a game at the end of the day. And some of the best players that we've all seen, they can see something, do something wrong and move on from it because they don't understand the true nature of the impact that it's had on everything. But for me and say some others, like, you're always wondering, like through the personal bits with the book, like I really struggled for a spell when Roberto Mancini came in at City, because I went from playing under Mark Hughes to not playing at all, and I didn't know why. I spoke to Roberto, didn't know why, didn't offer me anything. So I spent sleepless nights just really trying to think over everything I did, everything I could do, you know, and I couldn't control it, and that drove me to the point, as I say, of really struggling. Whereas for other people, it might be a case of, I'll just turn up tomorrow and just kick another ball towards some goal and everything will be fine. And that must be a nice feeling, but unfortunately that wasn't me. But yeah, it was good. Me focusing on my education was a big thing for me, because it meant that every time I played football, it felt more like a privilege as opposed to an expectation. A lot of I joined the academy when I was 10, and for lots of the younger players, because they were good, school didn't matter. They were just making sure they were ready for the games on the weekend. But for me, I was only able to go to the games on the weekend, not if I scored the week before, but if I got all my homework in on time, and if I was doing well in school, and I got used to it, I liked it, and it brought me to this point today where I can speak at something like this and actually string a few sentences together. Some consider it a privilege.
No,
some just
yeah, I
think it's
don't have
great.
to bail you out at any point, which is quite useful for me.
Yeah.
It means I can just listen instead of start to think about stuff. But that you mentioned that you have a kind of emotional maturity, which is at odds, I suppose, to critical thinking, because sometimes you can be so much of a critical thinker that everything's very kind of clear, that you don't actually have emotion come into it. But actually, you've said that your ability to critical think actually made you more emotionally mature because you had to kind of work things out. How did I feel about that?
Yeah.
Why did I feel that? And doing the book was kind of an extra kind of addendum to that, wasn't it? Because it allowed you to go through that thinking again and then also ask yourself, as you said at the beginning, how did I feel about it then? How do I feel about it now as a 35-ish-year-old man, as you were at the time?
Yeah, I'm... this might sound really weird. Bear with me, I'm workshopping this. Is it the ship of Theseus or something?
You're looking at me.
Does anyone know what I'm talking about? It's the what, sorry? Yeah, it's the thing where, say there's a ship, and in time, every piece is replaced. And then right at the end, you can get all the old pieces together to recreate the original ship. And the question is, which one is the real ship?
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
I do know exactly what you mean.
And for me, across the years, like, I look back at some of the things that I did, and that's me. But I look back at them from today and say, no way would I ever do that today. And the changes that happen along the way and the importance of them, and sort of deciding, like, who you are. And there are certain things which happened in my past, not to say that I wouldn't do now, but there's certain things which I'm deeply passionate about certain things now. And there are things which happened to me when I was younger, from a footballing standpoint, which I just let happen. But today, I wouldn't let them happen to a teammate, because I have the greater
let alone
understanding.
Yourself. Yeah,
exactly, yeah. Listen, it would 100% not happen to myself anymore. But you sense the bigger picture in terms of certain things.
Yeah.
So yeah, it does. It was really fascinating, because a lot of the stuff, like, you asked questions which nobody else asked me in my life, because we've been through it and now we're looking forward. But
it's funny because I just assume that people or somebody would have asked you these kind of things, because there are
no, absolutely not.
But there are parts of it that I knew I had to go there. So the racist abuse that you suffered when you were playing, and your mum passing away. These are, talking of emotional maturity, these are things that you have had several years to come to terms with, but are things that by their very nature, you don't really ever come to terms with them, because they leave you emotionally scarred. So I felt weirdly confident about asking about them, because I had this cover of, well, we're going to have to go there. So we did. And yet you said afterwards, particularly after we had the conversation about your mum, that you'd never had that kind of conversation before. And I just naively or not, I just kind of assumed that you had done so, whether it's just in passing or parts of it, or whether you just spoken to Lucy, your wife, about it, or to your dad. But you made me realize that you just don't really do that.
Within my life, and this might be the case for lots of other people, like, I am one of the rocks for them. So I don't necessarily give off the illusion like everything's fine, but more often than not, everything's fine. Every so often, like, I'll break down in tears about my mum passing or something, but it's very, very rare. So most people don't see it, so they won't ask about it, because it doesn't feel like it's a topic. Like, it was 10 years ago, literally 10 years. It's 10 years next week.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
It's like, that really matters to me, but I'm not going around trying to tell people about it. So in terms of some of the stuff which we discussed, it was good, because it was like therapy. Certain bits of it was like therapy, and I can understand why I did whatever I did at that time. And it made me sort of really take it all in totality, because it can be very easy to just point out certain things. But the line of questioning, and the fact that with every question they asked me, I knew this was going to go down in writing. I need to make sure I said it right. I need to make sure it's exactly how I felt.
And you did go back
exactly
quite a few times to make sure that
I can't. If I get my own story wrong, like, who's going to get it right at the end of the day? So.
No, but you like reiterated stuff. There were a few times that you said, I just want to make sure that I get this right. A, because you wanted it to be right coming out of your mouth, but also B, you wanted to give yourself another chance just to make sure you hadn't misrepresented yourself.
It matters to me, like, to to look back at something from two perspectives, the story about, say, my mum passing. So my mum in 2010 was diagnosed with cancer, and she ended up passing 2 years later. But it was only 2 years later that I realized, because we were finally told by the elders within, say, my family, that her diagnosis was a terminal one from the get-go, that she only had 6 months left to live. So all the things that I saw in the world at that time were based on the view that she was just going to overcome it and be fine. So that's, again, where the conversation's different, because I can look at it in totality and see how it's really affected me, and to look back at that time and sort of ask myself the question, did I do enough? Was I a good son? Did I do enough at this point when, say, she was getting abused from this or being in this moment? And that was different, because no one else would ever ask me that question, because it's such a deep one, and there's so many different sort of viewpoints to it, that for somebody to ask me that question, it was a great question. It's one which made me really sort of look at myself in the mirror. And I guess that's what you want when you're writing a book about yourself. You want it to be as open and honest as it can be about things which matter the most to you, as opposed to, you know, as I say, people can win things and write books about it, but this is different, and people will feel and understand where I'm coming from, firstly because of how I said it, and secondly because of how well he's written it. So I think it's a good representation of that.
It's funny, that's the chapter I said to you after I sent it to you, because you gave it to your sisters as well to read, and your dad, that was the chapter that mattered most to me, that you liked. And you were the last person to read it. Everybody else read it first, and they said it was okay. And one of your sisters, was it Linda who cried? I can't remember. It was
my younger sister.
Younger sister cried, and without being a massively cynical journalist, you know, that meant to me a lot, because I felt like that I'd done a good job. Which takes me back to my original point about it being an emotional process for both of us. It's my first book. I'm sitting here on a Football Writers Festival stage like I know everything about writing books. I don't. It's my first, and that's why it was kind of emotional context for me. But I just had a son at this time, so it was kind of like, you know, my head was completely in the clouds. But that part of it, for me, mattered a great deal, because it was a story that had to be done justice. And if anybody's ever done interviews or been at a Q&A for somebody, you know, whether it's sport-related or not, the best interviewers, and this was essentially a 30-hour interview, wasn't it, that are the ones that are not only invested in the person that they're speaking to because they're interested, but they also listen and care about the responses. You might go into, you know, if I've done a Q&A, you do your prep and you think, right, I'm going to ask this guy this question, and then I'm going to follow up, and we've got to make sure we include that. We were talking, weren't we, earlier, Jamal, about it with Fabrice. But the most important thing, genuinely, and it was a long interview, is that you listen to what the person is saying to you, and then you respond. And if you are invested and interested, you will do, hopefully, a better job of it. And that boils down to that moment when you said that it was, that part was okay.
Yeah.
Because I was emotionally invested, I thought, good, okay, that's all right.
Yeah.
The rest of it, don't, you know,
the rest of
you
it's
can
still
hate.
good. The rest of it's still good. Just
but yeah,
so we're clear.
I was surprised by that. Just like you said that you were surprised about the fact that nobody had asked you that question before, which I was also surprised about. It is strange to me that I went into this process thinking it's going to be an interesting story to be told, but actually by the end of it, and I read my own book twice for proofreading, not because I'm self-indulgent, although maybe, but or to check there weren't any mistakes. There's one mistake, I won't tell you where it is. But by the end, I felt like, because almost vicariously, I'd lived your life on a few occasions up until this point, that it was, that I had found myself even more emotionally invested.
Yeah.
And I probably don't think, I'm not entirely sure I'd recommend that to ghostwriters, because it makes it harder.
That's what I appreciated the most, though. You know what I mean? Because you bought into, like, he knew me from a while ago anyway, but he understood exactly where I was coming from with the things I was trying to express.
I was just pleased I knew a famous person. That's all that really mattered to me.
Somehow he chose me. But the whole thing has just been so interesting this last year. Like, to get the chance to come to something like this and to have Hugh alongside me discussing the book, it's great because he knows my life, he wrote the book, and we can talk about any page of it. But along this journey in the last year when it's come out, there have also been times when I've gone and had to speak about the book elsewhere. But say, for example, I was on TalkSport speaking about the book, and I was on a Zoom, and I couldn't see the studio or anything. And like the opening question is like, oh, so why should people buy your book? I'm like, because they've not read it. So it's like, well, what am I doing here? At this point, they're trying to pitch me as a salesman, as opposed to just talking about its nature and what there is to it, the depth of it all. And I hated that. And then afterwards, when I saw the interview back, they'd not named the book and they spelled my name wrong. I was like, well, it's good to know. Everything's great.
And the spelling of the name wrong is very significant if you read the book because it forms a central part of the introduction.
Listen, it's 6 letters. It's 6 letters. Once you know it, you should know it. But still, this is where we're at. But, you know, it's been an interesting process. There have been lots of good things that I've done in the last year. There have been lots of indifferent things which I've had to do. But then it's stuff like this which I enjoy doing because I know that certain people are into football literature, and I feel like the book itself is something which they can buy into because it's a good book. And it's not just because it's my own, even though I'd be a bit biased. It's a good book, and it's a good tale, especially for people who've either been connected to the clubs that I've been to or interested in reading about some of the realities of football, which don't necessarily live at the extremes, about, say, extreme success or like extreme addiction or something like that, which are stories within their own right, but they're not the stories of many, if you know what I'm trying to say.
We've probably spoken enough. We should open it up to the audience to see if there are any questions. Did anybody come last night? Did anyone come last night? Did you see Rory Smith? Rory Smith is a friend of mine and colleague of Nedum's as well.
Well, no, he's just a friend now.
Just a friend now, is he?
Now,
You've upgraded, have you? Does he know that?
I think he does.
Oh,
Yeah.
he knows that.
He does.
I think he does.
I think he does.
Rory, he was the guy that I phoned because we haven't really talked about the process because it sounds a bit pretentious, but he was the person that I phoned and said, how on earth do you do this? And he was incredibly helpful. He's a very good friend of mine, and he was honest. And the best thing you were saying about the things that matter to you when you finish the process and what people say to you, the best thing, the greatest compliment I've had is from him, who ghostwrote Micah's book, just in case the New York Times are listening. He's not allowed to say that. That's not public knowledge, but he did. He said to me, because I sent him a copy so that he could be in the blurb on the back, and he said, "Get your tanks off my lawn." So if anybody wants to know how I personally felt about the best piece of critical appraisal of it, it was Rory saying that. So I should say that I'm very grateful to him, seeing that some of you know who he is, and if you were here last night, you know quite how good a book writer he is. Damn him.
Let's get some questions on.
Yes, so questions. Have you got, we've got a mic doing the rounds, have we, Sam?
Yeah, I'll just dash around if anyone's got questions. So we'll start with Rick.
We've got at least 2, so there's one right by you, and we'll go to this lady in the second row afterwards. Thank you.
Yeah, great speech, by the way. You really inspired. I'm just wondering, you've had a great career. I'm just wondering, what was your best goal that you ever scored?
Best goal?
Yeah.
Listen, that's not too difficult a question.
You can just list
16.
them all if you want.
It's not that many. You know what I mean? There are people who have to think about hundreds. I'd say 16's my number. The goal that was spoken about the most was a goal I scored for Sunderland against Chelsea. This was in 2010. And it was a little mazy dribble from 4 yards out, put it in the corner, whatever. It's no big deal. But
meant it.
It's the context around it that really surprises me, though, because after that goal, so we were going down there at Sunderland, and Steve Bruce, the manager, said, if you win in London, everybody notices. We had no real away record at the time, but he said if you do that, everyone notices, and it was the Super Sunday game. And we went down there. We ended up beating them 3-0, and my goal when it went in is literally 12 years ago, almost to the day. That was the first goal that they conceded at home the whole season, and it was me. I did it. All those coupons for like first goal scorer, obviously it's me. So I'd say that one, but the one that probably had the most emotion to it was my first goal for Man City. It was against Spurs, and it was under Sven-Göran Eriksson, and it was actually 3 years into my career, so I decided that I was probably never going to score a goal ever. So to get ahead and to score, I'd spent 3 years knowing which celebration to have. Then I scored and I didn't have one ready. So I just ran around, just blowing kisses like this. It was a spectacular feeling, and that kind of sums up football. Why did you get so happy about a ball crossing the line and going into a net? But still, yeah, I'd probably say that was the one that brought me the most joy.
And why did you celebrate it like some sort of operatic tenor coming
Because
back from a
my mum
curtain
was up
call?
there. My mum was up there. Mwah, there you go.
She was not throwing you any roses.
Listen, how do you know?
I was there. Again,
Well,
I
this is
repeat,
true.
I was there.
You just
And plus,
freak
it's
out.
a distance.
It's just like some people expect to score, and then some people just go up for set pieces, and I was that guy until I scored. Then all of a sudden, it's like, this feels incredible. And yeah, I freaked out and had a historically bad celebration, but there we are.
No, I think it was excellent. Do you have a microphone yet? Ah, here it is.
Hi, Nedum. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right.
It's good, it's good.
So my question is, what would you tell your younger self with regards to ensuring longevity as a footballer and then pivoting once you retired as a footballer to doing what you're doing now?
Okay, that's a good question. And I think to talk about the change of career element, one thing about football which I think is a shame is from the moment you join an academy, everything's built around you making it as a professional. They don't really offer you a thought about what life looks like outside of that world. And the football world itself is very different to the real world. You know, whether it's the case of the way things are said, the timing of things, the fact that you could get a text the night before saying what time you're going to be in training the next day, or they can say you're going to be away for 2 weeks, you're going to do this, the health and fitness nature of it, the transfers, the fact that, like, oh, sorry, Siri thinks, apologies.
Have you closed your rings? Is that what?
I have actually. Yeah,
yeah, well done.
The fact that, say, your motivations change as you get older, because say when you're younger, you've got aspirations to win this and win that and win whatever. Then if you have a family, well, your kids in this school, you want to keep them in the same school. You know, so what I would say in terms of making a transition towards the end is I was lucky because when I went to Queen's Park Rangers, I was 25, 26 years of age. And I was surrounded by people who were in their mid to late 30s. And all the conversations I heard were about the end of their careers. So I started to get ready for the end of my career in my mid-20s to the point where I created a plan. And I retired when I wanted to, as opposed to when people told me that I had to. And I would recommend that to other people to really start getting ready for the end, even as you're starting to ascend. Because you never know when your last contract's going to be. You never know what health is going to look like. You never know how long you're going to play for. And if you start to have that sort of mentality, then you can actually start picturing yourself away from football. And unfortunately, not everybody can do that. And that's why there are some where they finish their careers, or rather their careers are finished for them, and they're lost. I think the divorce rate amongst footballers is at its highest within the first 18 months after somebody retires. You know, there's a whole change of life, change of everything. So I think preparing for the end from a younger point, it might seem taboo, but it makes perfect sense. And then for advice for my younger self, in some ways, I think I was a bit of a paradox because I played the majority of my games as I got older. And it was because there was more, and maybe in some ways it came in line with the changes in terms of science and stuff with, say, being a professional. But you learn how to look after yourself differently. When I was younger, I was just playing. I'd turn up and I'd just play and I'd just go home. But investment in your own health, say doing some of the stuff after training, some of the stuff before training, really sort of figuring out and realizing that one of the best abilities you can have is availability. So investing just as much time into that as you would do maybe taking free kicks or winning headers. Because if you're around, you've got a chance. If you're not, then you don't. And I think throughout the first probably 4 or 5 years of my career, I missed too much football with things which I could have maybe done better. Perhaps bad luck would have still been there. But there was a thing why when I was 30 or 31 years of age, I played 48 games, and it was every minute of every one of those games, and I did every minute of every training session. But to that point in my career, I'd never even come close. But lo and behold, when I'm supposed to be on the decline, I was actually heading in the other direction. So I think that'd be my advice in terms of just making sure that you can be as available as you can be.
That's what Sven told you to do? Stretch?
Yeah, Sven just kept saying stretch. I was like,
So
what
it's
do you
like,
need to
shut
stretch
up,
for?
Sven, what do you know?
Stupid child. Like, what do you need to stretch for, Sven? Just play football.
Question there, if that's all right, Sam. Thank you.
Hi, Nedum.
Hello.
Who's the toughest opponent you've come up against in your career? Can you pick one out?
Pardon?
Can you pick one out?
So I'm quite lucky because of the generation I'm in. I've played against a lot of the very biggest of names. Like I've played against Ronaldo, I've played a game against Messi, Ibrahimovic. You're looking at Thierry Henry's, Van Persie's, all that stuff, Ryan Giggs's, everything. But the one that probably sticks out the most, and this is like a more recent realization, is So Wayne Rooney's the top scorer for Man United all time, so currently top scorer for England. And that means, you think he's got this great ability of just like scoring goals. But where he's different is that he's a bit of a psychopath. So, like, he will kick the life out of you in a game. So instead of like, say you play against Sergio Aguero, incredible finisher, all that stuff. But he's like, you never really contact him, he's just ghosting around. And he'll have an impact because he'll score a goal. But Rooney will score a goal and you'll limp off the field because you've played against him. So I think I'd have to say him because his drive and his desire to choose violence makes him very hard to play against. And he was special. I remember I was under 16 and I got asked to come and play or to be in a squad for a youth cup game under 18s. And I finished school, went straight there, and I said, this player for Everton is supposed to be pretty good. I said he's called Rooney or something. And I said, all right, sure, whatever. He destroyed our under-18s team, and then a year later he started off on this trajectory, which we've seen him become one of the best that's ever played the game. He's just different. He's got all the talent in the world, and he's obsessed with winning. And he's got that edge, which most of those attackers tend not to have because they're usually a little bit soft, to be honest.
Thank you very much. Yes. You win because you put your hand up first, but then there was somebody right next to us, so Sam's having to do all the work. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Obviously, you played the majority of your career here in England, but also in the States. We were talking earlier on about mental health for young players that leave academies early. What do you think is the best system for young players to come through? Because obviously in the US, when they go to college, they get an education. Whereas here, the majority of young players, they leave their education early, or they're even encouraged to leave schooling early to concentrate on maybe going pro. So what do you think is the best route for players to take, or the best system between the UK and the US?
That's a good question because, Hugh will hate me saying this, but like it's quite nuanced, if you know what I mean. Because some of the kids coming through academies now, like they have the option to be in school like Man City's academy. I think they put them to St. Bede's, is it? Yeah. But not every kid wants to do that, and their parents don't want them to do it as well. So the system, even though it's there for them to allow them the opportunity to do it, not everybody's driven by books, let's say.
And it's often a bit of a sales pitch.
Yeah.
Like when you're trying to
it covers bases.
Recruit that talent, it's like, look, we've got St. Bede's, so that at least the parent feels like that they can.
That's if they want their child to do it. But not every parent has the same. Yeah, not every parent wants their child to be that concerned about going to school. And they might think that, their kid will finish up being a professional footballer, but then they also aren't too bothered if they're not. I think that's something that we sort of forget sometimes. There are a whole different lot of perspectives within an academy team. Like even in my one, so I had like Kasper Schmeichel in my team, Stephen Ireland, but then I also had 3 or 4 players who were just in Manchester, and we formed basically the best players from the Sunday League scene in Manchester. So we played for Man City because they wanted us. We didn't all play for Man City because we were the best players in Sunday League who had aspirations to go and play at the highest level. So from them, they were living their lives anyway. And some of them, they left the academy and they didn't choose to go to college, just went and started working as it was anyway. And then in America, there's the potential for some people to go to college, but more teams now have academies. So there's basically a split. If you're in the academy system in America, then you could be in around the first team from 17, 18. But some of them then go to college, and in America, they keep hold of your rights as a player. So if you decide to try and come back to the league, then they'll bring you back in. But what it means is that some of those players, they'll be like when I first went to the US, there was a player who ended up being Rookie of the Year called Corey Baird, and I thought he's had a really good season and so on. So I thought he must be like 18, 19. He was 23, turning 24. I thought, what? Because I started at 17, so he's 23, 24, and he actually went to Stanford, but he didn't do well in Stanford, but he went to Stanford because they tried to push the sort of college athletic system on him. And another friend of mine, he went to the College Notre Dame, which is like a big college over there, and he's 27, 28, and he's just been released by my old team. And I said, where are you going to sign next year? He said, I don't know, I might just go and do something else. Like, it's a different mentality altogether. And the education thing in America, depending on which school you go to, can help you for the longer term. But then if you go to college in America, the likelihood is that you don't really have long aspirations about spending many years playing professional football. Whereas if you're doing it here and you're fully committed to it, you'd probably admit that that's the main goal. So the two things ultimately are different. And I think it would depend, because I would say there are certain people who could benefit from, say, being based in the UK now, traveling to the US to go to one of those like big colleges, which could help them over there should they perceive it to be something that's successful, and then maybe enter the MLS draft. And that gives them a career path, because ultimately the MLS is very different to the major leagues around Europe and the world. Because if you go to college in America, you can be perceived as an asset. Whereas if you're not playing by the time you're 17, 18 in the UK, then your time's basically done. So I think it depends what your motivations are for your child.
There was going to be a question next to you, Sam. I don't know if it's already been answered. There we go.
Hi. So you mentioned before how your time at Man City, you went from Mark Hughes to Mancini. Just so how different were they as both managers and as people, and what sort of impact did Mancini coming in have on you?
You were still at City when Mancini came in, didn't you?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
I'll get back to that. Did you find a difference between the two of them?
Well, yeah, obviously, but
What was different?
Well,
I promise you, I'll answer the question.
Can you remember when? Well, you can remember. Can you remember when Mark Hughes was sacked, that Sunderland game where everybody knew beforehand, and he did, says Nedum.
Yeah.
So I believe you.
Yeah.
But obviously he couldn't outwardly display it until the end when he waved and he went off, and then there was this kind of slightly shambolic Gary Cook press conference where he was asked about what was going on. We on the commentary show that the game afterwards. We did all that over the music for Nightmare Before Christmas, because it happened just before Christmas, late December, wasn't it? And so the way that the transition happened framed the beginning of it for us. But such was the nature of who he was, and because Hughes was considered to be the kind of person who had a limit to his ceiling, but Mancini was supposed to be this kind of transformational, transcendent guy because of who he was and where he could take Manchester City. There was a sense of excitement about following City from that moment on, even if his English wasn't necessarily particularly easy to get into short sound bites for the radio.
Yeah, I don't think you answered the question, but sure. So anyway, for me to answer.
I asked them, I don't answer them.
With so Mark Hughes, interestingly, like, you could get some jokes from him and stuff, but he's a bit of an introvert. So there's certain things that he'd be doing, but he would never really get full engagement. He was about his backroom staff and his team. And he came in and he changed infrastructure at City, changed the training ground, and he made people realize that football goes far beyond just what you do on the training field. So every day we'd be doing tests to make sure that we're ready and fully available to train. They were monitoring us, and they were trying to squeeze out every last bit that they could from us in a more scientific approach and with style of football, because he'd been very successful before with Blackburn and with Wales doing that. So he was really good. I think he changed my career, because I mentioned before about, having injuries and all that stuff. From when he came in, from that point forward, I didn't really miss that many games, just because I changed my perception of what was required. And he was good. But I think what some people, and I stress it's only some, what some people forget is that Mark Hughes came in before the takeover happened. So they judge him according to what the takeover was and how he was failing as a manager that was supposed to bring success for City at that standpoint. But that's not why he was brought in. He was brought in to make us better. And he made us better, but then all of a sudden the ceiling became far higher, because their ambitions became so much higher.
And also, remember, he was brought in after Sven, and Sven's departure, apart from the 8-1 that happened in the last day, Sven's departure, a lot of City fans were campaigning for him to not go. The players liked him as well. So there was a bit of a kind of shifting sands underneath Mark Hughes when he arrived as well. And yes, he did change the infrastructure. He took the press from the main building and shoved us in a porta cabin in the car park.
Rightly so as well, because it's not about you. But Mark Hughes, I like Mark Hughes. I think I played some of my best football under him. And interestingly, as I look back at my career at City, I think it was like 110 games or something across a few years, and that it should have been more, really, if I was more available, if I was like harder with certain bits. But I played the most games in a season his first year, which interestingly was the first year after the takeover happened. He was on our tour around Europe and all this stuff, and that was my best football for City. So when people say, new ownership comes in and everything's going to go wrong, it's not necessarily always the case. But then when Roberto came in, Mark Hughes was good, and we shouldn't forget he brought in Pablo Zavaleta, Vincent Kompany. So from a recruitment standpoint, I think they did okay. I think they did all right. But when Roberto came in, he had a whole different set of expectations. Like, he carried the weight, like he's been brought in. He's the guy, and whatever he says goes. If I look back, at that point was probably the moment where there was the least amount of job security amongst a bunch of players and arguably staff that I've ever seen, because he was the guy and they were going to back him. Whatever he said would go. They changed the training ground. They changed the players. And he was he was tough. He didn't really provide a lot of charisma outside of when the camera was rolling. He had his scarf on and he was swooping his hair around, you know. And as players, when you were there, he was very, very hard on people. Like, this is a guy who... there was a point when I think the team was losing when Yaya Toure was suspended. Obviously, Yaya Toure is incredible, but he'd looked like Carlos Tevez, Sergio Aguero, Julian Lescott, Gareth Barry, all these people, David Silva in the eye, and say, you guys are no good without Yaya. Oh, it's not true though, is it? You know what I mean? But they couldn't say anything because that's how much power he had at the time. But I think it was what the club needed to be successful. Because with Mark Hughes, he aspired to be great, whereas Roberto expected to be. Every time he played in a game, he expected the team to win. I think sometimes that was to his detriment because he sort of disregarded the opposition because, you know, you're not just playing against 11 like mannequins or whatever. But his belief system was one whereby you had to meet that standard. And as players, I look back and think like his legacy, because say today I'm 35 years of age, and I'll sometimes still play five-a-sides and stuff around Manchester with some of my friends. And I'll do certain things in a game, and I wonder why did I do that? And it's because of stuff which Roberto said from way back when. But he didn't just say it, he insisted upon it. You have to stand here when this happens. And you have to be here, and you have to pass the ball there. And it kind of drove you insane. But it worked because that's his vision of how he wanted you to play, and it sticks with you. So he changed because he had a different set of expectations. The players didn't love him, but the players played for each other. They stuck to the plan. They won games, but there wasn't really that level of engagement. And for me, I believe that if there was more engagement between Roberto, the staff, and the players, I think he would have stayed for longer. I think City would have won that FA Cup against Wigan, and I think his legacy would have been far greater than, you know, the FA Cup was huge, the Premier League title was huge, but to take the edge off it a little bit, for as good as he was, 10 years ago in that game when they beat QPR, in the 15 minutes before Edin Dzeko scores that second goal, he was on the sideline and his tactics were to shout in Italian at the players how bad they all were. That's escaping history. So, yeah, he didn't bring out the best in the players, surprisingly. But yeah, he was very different, and I think he was very important for that time. And he brought success, and I can never take that away from him. He changed my career and lots of other people's career, arguably for the worse. But he did the job that was required of him at City at that time because he raised the bar, raised the expectation, and now there are a group of players in there who only accept success, and I guess he was the first step with that.
Yeah, it is a measure of Nedum that he answered that in a very diplomatic way.
No. Let me rephrase that. So respectfully, no, I can't be respectful. So myself and lots of other people hated him with a passion.
There we go.
But he definitely served a purpose.
That was the lead that he buried.
Yeah.
No, it's true. But it's also a measure of how you are in the book, that you are genuinely, he disintegrated you mentally.
Yeah.
And yet you are capable, even though he did that and potentially ruined your Manchester City career, and at that moment when it was happening, your relationship with your club, that you can speak with nuance and understanding of the bigger picture. But it was the way that Roberto Mancini carried himself that eventually was the end of him at Manchester City, because he essentially alienated everybody apart from his very, very close inner circle. So even though he did bring success, and even though it was something that you can understand as to how he did it, it wasn't just you that he eventually alienated.
If I sound really salty about something that's true, people are less likely to listen because they'll think it's just an agenda that I have against him. Because I remember that, because at the time, anytime anybody ever said anything negative about Roberto Mancini, it was brushed to the side because, oh, well, this player's not played this week, or this person's not done that, even though the things that we were saying were true. Yeah. And that was always a shame. And this is another reason why I'm quite happy and proud to say the book is out. Because for me and lots of others, you don't want to rock the boat when you're playing. And any sort of negative story could be perceived as you trying to take momentum away and you being a villain. But now we can at least myself and lots of others who played in that era, you can be honest and really talk about it and talk about the real details of it, because, you know, this is why I think Hugh's good, because he understands the bigger picture and stuff like that. But then, as I found with talking about Roberto, talking about, what's his name now? Harry Redknapp, possibly a couple others, because their legacy is so great, as a player, you'll sit down to have an interview like this, and I'm like, I'll tell you what, it must be great to have Harry Redknapp as manager, mustn't it? And I'm like, and at that point, you've got a decision to make, because Harry, for a time, wasn't great at QPR. When somebody asks you that question, you either say, yes, he's great, or you say, no, he's not. And the answer that causes no controversy is to say, yes, he's great.
Even if it's a lie, yeah.
It's exactly. So you spend a lot of time just making just a whole ton of lies about things which you completely disagree with, but you're trying your best to be a good player.
And it's fascinating because we all cover manager press conferences, and managers hate doing them, and yet managers drive the narrative because they get to speak to the press so much more often.
Harry's so good at that.
And Harry's very good at that. He's got a lot of people on his side. Anyway, that's another thing for another day. But you weren't particularly unhappy then when Italy failed to qualify for the World Cup.
Oh, did they not make it?
Oh, did they not make it?
Did they not make it?
Newsflash.
Talk about like trauma or like real pain is seeing Italy like be so good and win the Euros in England. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but then, you know, cup happens.
If there was to be a group chat of all the people that were actively rooting against Italy, like the 600 deep, but then, you know, he does it. And in fairness, I give the benefit of the doubt, as I do with other people in the book like Joey Barton. Maybe they've changed. Maybe. So I always reference back when they were a mess. But maybe they've changed.
Yeah, maybe not, Joey. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your attention. We appreciate that this has been a fairly lengthy and detailed sales pitch. With that in mind, please buy the book if you haven't already. It's really good. It's his words, nothing to do with me. I recommend it because of that only. Plus, you know, if I'm going to do another one, he certainly won't be involved, and I need the money, he doesn't. He's a former footballer. So applaud him completely. Nedum Onuoha, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much. It's been great to spend the time with you. Thank you. Come on, Em.